Anybody got any questions for the panel? I'll bring the microphone over to you or pass it on for you. Who's got a question? It's always the first question that's the hardest one, isn't it? Any questions or any questions? Here we go. Let me come to you.
Sorry, this is for the manufacturing one, but can you really 3D print meat? That has blown my mind.
Do you want to explain how you 3D print meat, Paul? And what flavour you can have?
You're not actually printing meat, you're actually printing the proteins, so which then creates the meat because you're building up the layers of the different proteins to make meat. And yes, you can do steak, and yes, you can do chicken. And it will taste of those.
Yeah. Could you? Medium rare? Can you choose how you want it cooked? It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
It's a bit of a gimmick because it's actually being used to generate cell cultures and things like that, and to generate skin. That's what the primary use is in the medical industry. So you build scaffolds so that you can put different things onto the scaffolds and different skins so that you can look at treatments for cancers and various different things.
Amazing. Anybody else got any questions? There's one. Oh, it's always on the other side, isn't it? Hang on a minute. Coming to you. If we don't let you have the microphone, we can't hear what you're saying on the cameras. So.
Thanks. Yeah, a question more for Tracy. I mean, your vision for 2050 was very much based on a business as usual growth scenario. And I just wondered whether there's any work going on in terms of foresight and different alternative future planning. Because with climate change and various other, we're up against lots of planetary boundaries, that we should be radically rethinking how we're living and working, and some of those scenarios, for example, around transport. I really think, well, I'd like to think that within Shropshire Council there were some different alternative views being looked at, even just as alternatives to business as usual. Thanks.
There will be. As I said, this is really at the early sort of stage of thinking about, I mean, obviously there is other work going on in terms of how we move around Shropshire and those sort of policy interventions, but this is just really to say, we're grabbing this information and we're gathering data at the moment, and it's to start that conversation leading to perhaps next year an annual symposium that will then sort of bring all the information that's been shared together and then start to think about how it can change the future and how we can influence things going forward. So I think the answer to the question is, yes, we want to be doing more of that, but at the moment it's about gathering that data and evidence first and seeing if we've got it right, because what I shared with you today is what we've found to date, what we think the future might look like if there is no interventions into that. It helps us to sort of think about the change, really.
Does anybody else want to add to that at all? Anybody else got anything they want to say?
I need some more context for...
This was transport, how we move around the space.
Yeah. For me, everything happens in the internet. That's why I personally feel that COVID forced us all to learn how to use video conferencing. It forced us 5 or 10 years ahead of where we would have been if we just naturally left it to our own devices. My mum can FaceTime me. This is a miracle. So I think transport, it's different to a few years ago, in that we need places for community now. The high street's completely transforming because we're spending so much time talking to people all over the world via Zoom and so on. Actually, we need to make sure that the transport will take us to the town centre, to places where we can meet and spend time with each other, and places like this where we can exercise and do these social activities. So it's a complete paradigm shift, I think, is what we need to be looking at with transport, because it's not necessarily the daily commute anymore. So there's so much hybrid working. It's about taking us to where others are, so we can be with each other.
Thank you very much. Anybody else anything? Jane looks like she's desperate to say something.
Absolutely, Carl. Thank you for spotting that. I was just going to say part of that future look as well was about housing, wasn't it?
Yes,
Which is another area that I cover at Shropshire Council, and it's a real challenge for us to think about what the right sort of form of housing should be for 2050, because it's not only housing an ageing population, which is what was identified in the demographic stats based on sort of looking forward from our census data so far. It's also thinking about the way in which we live. So it's those older households, but also more people choosing to live on their own in single-person households or just much smaller households. And that doesn't really match our current accommodation in Shropshire. We've got a lot more family homes than homes for single people or couples. And I think that's a bit of a challenge as well for us, in the house building business, which again Shropshire Council is part of, but there are many others doing this too in Shropshire. And I think it's a bit of a challenge for us really to think about how we not only develop new homes to meet the changing population that we can actually see coming forwards, but also how we work with the existing accommodation we have, because of course most of the housing in Shropshire in 2050 is what we've already got here in 2023. So what are we going to do with it? How are we going to adapt it? And that sort of climate challenge that we just heard as well is part of that too. So thinking about the changing environment, the changing climate, how we're going to kind of shift the way in which we live and operate to sort of reflect what we anticipate is going to happen in terms of the climate around us. So that could be about investing in our homes to make them warmer in winter, more fuel efficient. It could also be about reflecting on the potential for much warmer summers. I mean, my goodness, we all felt it the other year when we had it up in the 30s, and it was just something completely unusual for Shropshire. And it's at that point you start to realise, I really benefited from having a basement office in my house at that point. It was really nice and cool, but for a lot of people that was quite difficult. So I think these are challenges that we've got to start contemplating. It's the right properties in the right places for a different sort of a population, and what do we need to think about differently to adapt to that and make it successful.
Thanks, Jane. There's a question over here.
I think on the subject of independent living or single-person households, we also have a lot of loneliness and isolation in our communities. So are you considering independent community living, which isn't run by builders, but is, say, cooperatively owned? So I was reading about a really interesting development for women that is a cooperative and had been developed somewhere in London, I can't remember where, but it combated a lot of the issues that we're facing as we grow older, are less able and become more isolated.
I think that is one for me again. And you're talking about the co-housing scheme that was delivered in Barnet by a very forward-looking group of ladies. I think it took them quite a long time. I think it took them about 15 years or something to make it happen. But it was quite inspirational in terms of what it delivered, and it's a really interesting model. And I know it's something that a housing association called Housing 21, who specialise in housing for older people, have initiated in Birmingham recently. So I'm watching that with great interest to see how that develops, because it is something that is quite an interesting model. It's a different way of bringing communities together and thinking about, you're exactly right, those sort of older people who might be living on their own but actually want the support of a community of like-minded people, and how to make that happen. It's a really interesting model, and one that I'll be interested to see if we could perhaps pull off somewhere in Shropshire.
Thank you. Question here at the front.
Tracy, I think it's probably one for you. I was interested in those demographics you were saying about, the ageing populations and basically the flow that we're looking at down there. Is that a fait accompli, or are some of these strategies to try and change some of those? Because obviously they cause some problems that we're going to face further down the line, don't they, as well? So things like developing university town more, investing in technology and skills that Paul's been talking about, those type of things. Are those the strategies we're trying to get on board with to, if you like, stop some of those things happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you sound the man, really. They're exactly the things that we're trying to think about. Today was just about to share what we think we know, what may happen, the policy off bit, but they're the policy on bits, aren't they, really? How can we keep people, young people, to stay in Shropshire? And it is a challenge. We see them leave for university and often don't come back until, they're all in their sort of 40s. or older again, come back and retire. You know, I know when I came here to work, while I was incoming, most people said to me, you know, where are you working? I said, I'm going over to Shropshire to work. And they said, oh, well, my parents retired there. And if I had £1 for every person that said that. So, you know, and that's why some of those statistics, you know, we were looking at sort of straight lines, but, you know, it's interesting, isn't it, that whole over 80, 85 statistic. And you know, we're not saying that we don't want 85-year-old plus people in Shropshire. Of course, that's not the case, but we do need to sort of think about how we increase that population. And migration is a significant thing for us. You know, that whole bit about, you know, how many people are dying, how many people are being born. We're reliant on migration, which is just, you know, these are just things to think about. And then how do we change those going forward?
Could I add something? Being a technology employer, we found this really challenging over the last few years. Generally, by the time a software developer comes back age 40, 45, we can't afford them anymore. They're too experienced. And so we've been actively recruiting people straight out of college, which works, but it leaves that mid-gap, which is really important to fill. So hybrid working, remote working touches it a bit, but really it's about community. You know, we really want to build a community of people here. We don't want to be employing people in Basingstoke. So Jeannie and I have been working for a few years now on building a digital incubator. It's just I'm mentioning it, one, in case there are people that want to get involved, but also as an example of the kind of initiatives we might be able to start. So we're putting together a digital incubator that will allow younger people to pitch technology ideas. And then we have a team that we're assembling of mentors that will actually help them take that idea to market, pitch in front of venture capitalists, and employ people so that we have young people in the town doing really cool things that then in turn attracts more young people and hopefully stops others from moving away. So that's something we're really excited about.
Thanks, Paul. We've got time for one more question. Anybody else want to ask a question to finish us off? Here we go.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just really interested in the AI, and from a business perspective, maybe the anxiety that is there with regards to bad actors and their influence. So I'd just be really interested to understand how you can build the confidence in AI, knowing that there is so much fake news out there.
Yeah, that is scary. I totally agree. And I probably should have started my talk with a disclaimer that there are some massive ethical issues that we have to deal with here. There are regulations that need to get in place. It's a Wild West at the moment. In some ways that's kind of exciting. I imagine it was quite exciting in the Wild West back during the gold rush, but at the same time lots of people were getting shot. And I think there are people putting together regulations. Already we saw Stable Diffusion, which had used thousands of artists' work without any kind of permission. They've ripped all of that training out now so that you can't just type, I don't know, make me a Van Gogh, and there it prints out. Or maybe you still can, but the aim is that you can't. And I think those kind of regulations need to come in, but at the same time, there's something extraordinary happening here. And my concern is I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so I'm hoping those regulations will come in sensibly. But I agree, it is scary, and at the moment, I mean, I'm sure many of you saw the fake video of the Ukrainian president telling all the soldiers to put down their arms. That was obviously created by the Russians. That stuff's not funny. That's not playing. And at the moment, there's no way of stopping people from doing that. So I'm afraid I don't have an answer. I share your concern, but I also share other people's optimism that regulations will come in and we'll have some sensible guide rails that won't knock everything down and suddenly mean we can't use these kind of tools that are enhancing us at the moment.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your questions. Can I just ask you all to then wrap this up by just answering, take it in turns, whoever wants to go first with this question. If there's one thing then that you'd like people in this room to take away from today, what would you like it to be? Who wants to go first?
Seeing as I've got the mic, I'll just say, understand what technology can do for you. Look at bringing it into your business and in your environment now, before your competitor does.
Today, tomorrow is exciting, but the future could be even more exciting. So let's start thinking ahead, really, to the art of the possible.
And for me, it's about businesses linking with community, really, and thinking about how what you do, you can add a little bit more in terms of your connections with the communities that you serve. Doesn't have to cost a whole load of money, and there are actually some opportunities where you can benefit from that as well. It's about working together with your communities, being part of your communities, which I'm sure you all are anyway, but there's some new opportunities coming your way, so keep a lookout for them.
I'm going to be a bit stuck here. Everybody said everything so far. I'd like to say to all the businesses here, you know, there's a great panel up here, but if you want to talk to a university which is relevant to its students and relevant to businesses, come and have a chat to Aston and see how 3D printing can help you. And I promise I won't print off some meat for you to eat.
I think we're one Shropshire. We've got one plan. We've got one vision, and actually if everyone in the room came together and put forward ideas, gave some time, we would actually make it happen and deliver on that strategy that Shropshire has come together and created.
I'm not saying go out and buy a Shrewsbury Town ticket at the moment, but what I am saying is the sports industry is a powerful thing in Shropshire, and we are going to be using it to not only develop the people of Shropshire, their mental and physical health, but getting them into work, which is a priority that I think everyone is really keen on. And I would like to speak to the businesses, anyone who is interested in providing pathways for the people we do engage. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks very much for listening to me.
And thank you very much to our panel. Can we give them all a round of applause, folks? Thank you very much. You can go and sit down now.